Hello and welcome to Lost Love Chronicles. After 2 decades of marriage, I found out my wife had been unfaithful. I walked away without a second thought, leaving everything behind to start fresh. It's something you never imagine will happen to you. You hear stories about friends going through divorces for all kinds of reasons, but because you trust and love your spouse, you think you're different. You believe you won't be just another statistic, another failed marriage. But as I look at divorce rates now, I can't help but wonder why anyone gets married at all. Maybe I should have recognized the warning signs. Looking back, and after reading countless articles and stories, I see how love can cloud your judgment. When you're in love, everything feels softer and the red flags become easier to ignore. Marriage comes with dreams, children, a home, a shared future. The thought of growing old together is comforting, but those signs were always there even if I refused to see them. I grew up in a family that eventually split into a single-parent household. For most of my childhood, my parents' marriage seemed unbreakable. They appeared to love and respect each other. My father worked tirelessly, physically draining himself, but he did it all for us. He was devoted. My mother returned to work when my younger sister started school, but she was always there for us too. As kids, we were unaware of the cracks forming, but later it all made sense. The affair didn't start immediately. I was a teenager when it began. My brother was about 18 months younger than me, and my sister was 3 years younger. It started the way these things often do. Late nights at work, out-of-town business trips, immediate showers after coming home from suspicious outings, and dressing far better than she ever had for my father. Back then, there were no smartphones, so she'd sneak phone calls and disappear at strange hours for so-called meetings. My father only discovered the affair when he came home early one day, hoping to surprise her. She had told him she was taking the afternoon off to get her hair done and go shopping. Instead, he found her car and another car he recognized in the driveway. He parked down the street, entered through the back door, and walked into their bedroom. There, he found her with her boss, James Thornton, in their marital bed. My father lost his temper and attacked him. James crawled out of our house, bruised and beaten. But my father soon realized that in a world where no-fault divorce had become the norm, infidelity carried little legal weight. People say possession is 9/10 of the law, and it felt true. He tried to throw her out, packed her things, and sent her to my grandparents. But they wanted nothing to do with her after learning the truth. Her own sister refused to take her in. The house was co-owned, and she refused to leave. My father was trapped. Under the law, they had to live apart for 12 months before divorce could be filed. Before finalizing the divorce, my father made several attempts to evict my mother due to her infidelity. But adultery wasn't considered a crime, and she had every legal right to stay in the house. No-fault divorce laws can feel particularly unfair in cases like this, where one partner breaks their vows but faces no real consequences. Eventually, my father gave up on trying to stay under the same roof with the woman who had betrayed him. He moved out and found an apartment. Unfortunately, it wasn't large enough to accommodate all 3 of us kids, so we stayed with our mother. I quickly figured out what was really going on and didn't hesitate to tell her exactly how I felt. She tried to justify her actions, but I told her outright that I would live with my father the first chance I got. My younger brother and sister weren't told the truth, so they were left confused about why our father had suddenly left. I tried to explain as best I could without diving into all the details. The only decent thing my mother did that year was continue allowing us to visit our father. During those early months, he was heartbroken. He did his best to stay strong for us, especially my siblings. But as the oldest, I could tell his smiles were forced. One night, after they had gone to bed, he sat me down and admitted that we, as children, were the only reason he kept going. He promised to fight for custody in a place we could all live together. But back then, it was rare for fathers to win custody. After the required 12-month separation, the divorce went to court. When I was finally old enough to express my wishes legally, I made it clear I wanted to live with my father. Unfortunately, my brother and sister were considered too young to decide, and despite their words, custody of all 3 of us was awarded to our mother. One small consolation for my father was that unlike in the US, Australia doesn't award alimony. While spousal maintenance exists, it's rarely granted, especially since our mother was already employed. He only had to pay a fair amount of child support, which in Australia is more reasonable than in many other countries. It didn't leave him financially ruined. The next 4 years were tough. I resented my mother deeply, and she knew it. Anytime she introduced a new man, I made sure he knew she had cheated and broken up our family. I brought her to tears more than once. By the time I turned 16, we barely spoke. I spent most of my time away from home at school, work, or anywhere else I could be. After the divorce, my father slowly rebuilt his life. Eventually, he met a kind woman named Natalie who was also divorced. I supported their relationship from the beginning, and over time she came to love us as her own. She had children too, and we embraced them as siblings. Despite all the pain, I was comforted knowing my father had found love again. Even though I knew my father was hesitant about marrying again, Natalie seemed to understand his fears and happily agreed to live together instead. They eventually rented a place and began a de facto relationship. As soon as I turned 18 and graduated from high school, I moved out of my mother's house. The only reason I had stayed that long was for my younger siblings, whom I hated to leave behind. By that point, my relationship with my mother had completely deteriorated. The final words I said to her were, I'll admit, harsh, but they were the result of years of bottled up anger and pain. I had watched my father be forced out of his own home simply because he refused to remain married to someone who had betrayed him. Despite everything, my mother cried as I packed up my car. I hugged my brother and sister before I left, assuring them I would always be there for them, that I would never abandon them. Then I took one last look at my mother and drove away. That experience left me wary of women. I had read a lot about infidelity and knew deep down I was someone who valued monogamy. I wanted a partner who felt the same. I had a few girlfriends in high school, but once I started working and earning money, I began dating more seriously, hoping to find someone I could truly trust and love. I met Kayla when I was 21. She had just finished university and I was working as an engineer while also attending night classes. I enjoyed working with my hands, but hoped to eventually move up into a managerial role. We met at a corporate event. She was working part-time as a sales rep for a supply company that collaborated with the firm I was representing. We clicked instantly. By the end of the day, I had her number saved in my phone and told her I'd be in touch. Marvin going on a hot date? My roommate asked. He was one of my closest friends from high school and we were living together to split the rent. Something like that, I replied. Is this the girl from the conference? Yeah, I said, smirking. Back off, Dave. I just waited a few days so I wouldn't seem too eager. I finally called her, and to my relief, she sounded excited, eager to meet up again. After throwing on some aftershave and giving myself a final look in the mirror, I realized I actually looked pretty decent, not like a bum for once. My job was respectable, even if the pay wasn't amazing, and I was living comfortably. We agreed to meet at a bar in town. I prefer to keep first dates simple, no fancy dinners. I'd heard too many stories of guys being used for free meals, never to hear from the woman again. When I walked in, she was already there, perched on a stool with a drink in hand. Our eyes met across the room. She smiled, and my heart instantly picked up pace. As the evening went on and the drinks flowed, we started opening up to each other. She admitted her role at the company was only temporary. She'd been hired mostly because her looks helped draw in customers. She laughed, admitting it was true, but said it made her feel like a piece of meat. So many married men came after me, she said. It was disgusting. I understood where she was coming from. Sure, my own mother had cheated, but from everything I'd read and observed, both men and women were equally guilty when it came to infidelity. Out of curiosity, I looked up some statistics online and was shocked by how many people, both men and women, openly admitted to having extramarital affairs. To make matters worse, several Australian articles painted our nation as full of unfaithful partners. You were the perfect gentleman, Marvin, she told me, taking my hand in hers. You kept eye contact the whole time and were completely professional, at least until you asked for my number. I placed one hand over my heart and raised the other. I swear I'm single. Ask any of my friends. She smiled and grabbed my hand again. Good. I get a really good feeling about you. I've already been hurt before. We agreed to take things slow. For the next few weeks, we met for coffee or cocktails, keeping it casual. By the third date, we shared our first kiss. She already knew about what had happened between my parents. And when she hugged me tightly that night, I felt something inside me ease. When we kissed, I knew it was right. And when I looked into her eyes, I saw she felt the same. A week later, drinks turned into dinner, and she came back to the apartment I shared with Dave. Fortunately, he was rarely home as he spent most of his time at his girlfriend's place. After one last drink, I took her hand and we made love for the first time. A month later, she told me she loved me. I said it back and things just grew from there. When she landed a stable job, we started talking about the future, moving in together, buying a house, marriage, and having children. Even though the memory of what had happened to my father lingered in my mind, Kayla had already won my heart. That was what mattered. She was warm, kind, and easy to be around. She often said her biggest dreams were to be a wife and a mother. Before getting married, we decided to buy a house together. Luckily, this was just before the housing boom that swept across Australia, especially Sydney. But due to her unstable employment history and poor credit, which she was upfront about, she couldn't co-sign the mortgage. I couldn't afford the loan alone, and the banks wouldn't approve it. My father suggested becoming a co-borrower, using his income to support my application. I had no idea how much that would help in the long run. Kayla was so grateful that she nearly cried when he told her she was like another daughter to him. Her parents adored me as well, and just 3 months after moving into the house, I proposed. Everyone was overjoyed when we announced our engagement and set a wedding date. Up to that point, marrying Kayla was the happiest day of my life. I truly believed I had found my soulmate, and she often said the same. As I walked down the aisle toward her, I couldn't stop grinning. She started giggling when I took her hand, and we were both filled with joy that we had finally made our commitment official. This wasn't a church wedding. We chose a park instead, setting up a marquee nearby for the reception. Our honeymoon was a week-long getaway to a Pacific island filled with sun, sea, and sand. Unsurprisingly, that was when Kayla became pregnant with our first child. 9 months later, she gave birth to a beautiful baby girl, and then our son arrived. 3 months later, we both agreed our family was complete. Surprisingly, Kayla didn't want me to have a vasectomy in case we changed our minds in the future. She didn't want her tubes tied either. Instead, she went back on birth control, saying it had never caused her issues before. Life carried on. She stayed home as a full-time mother until both kids started school. Once our son began attending, she returned to part-time work, sticking to school hours. It wasn't until both children were in middle school that she resumed working full-time. By the time we were 45, I had advanced to regional manager for a national engineering network. I traveled often, but was rarely away overnight. Kayla had built a successful career in real estate and managed her own office with only occasional trips to the main headquarters in the city. Our daughter Charlene eventually moved in with her boyfriend, a respectable young man who seemed deeply committed to her. I figured a wedding was just around the corner. Our son Stanley was still at university living near campus. He had a variety of interests, and while not all of them were conventional, Kayla and I supported him wholeheartedly. We had been married for over 2 decades. I believed we were still in love just as we were on our wedding day. I remained devoted to her, loyal in thought and action. I might have noticed other women, but I never acted on it. My heart belonged to Kayla. I couldn't betray her. Still, I couldn't shake the memories of what had happened to my father. I should have recognized the warning signs. I thought I was being cautious, preparing myself mentally for something I hoped would never come. "You never think it's going to happen to you, do you?" I said to Dave. "You think Kayla is cheating on you?" His voice was laced with disbelief. "Mate, she absolutely adores you." "I thought so too," I replied. "But now that Stanley's moved out, I expected things to go back to how they were. Instead, she's acting just like my mother did with my dad. Even thinking about it made my blood boil. I hadn't seen my mother in over 20 years. She'd come to my wedding only because my father insisted. By then, he was married to Natalie and long retired. He encouraged me to be the bigger person and invite her. I didn't want to, but I knew not doing so would reflect badly on me. So I clenched my jaw and mailed the invitation. Since then, our only communication had been occasional emails about the grandchildren she barely made time to see. Beyond that, I had no contact with her. So, what's your plan? Gather as much evidence as I can. If she's cheating, I'll leave no drama. Just walk away. And how exactly are you going to pull that off? I have my ways. She's gotten more careful lately. I should have noticed the signs earlier. This is what I get for trusting her. By the time I truly saw what was happening, it was already too late to stop it. So now I'm just preparing for the inevitable. That Monday morning, I scheduled a meeting with a private investigator. I didn't need photos or video, just something solid that could help my case. Unfortunately, adultery isn't legal grounds for divorce in this country. That's true, I admitted, but a man can still protect himself if he's smart and fast. Luckily, she waited until the kids were out of the house to start messing around. And in her arrogance, she forgot a few important legal details that could work in my favor. He patted me on the shoulder. I'm sorry, mate. I really am. I took a long sip of my beer. The hardest part is I still love her. Maybe I'm paranoid. Maybe I'm just a jealous fool, but the signs are there. I ignored them too long. The next morning, I drove to my father's place. Natalie greeted me with her usual warmth and asked if I wanted her to sit with us. I must have looked worse than I thought because even though it was only 10 a.m., my dad handed me a cold beer and told me to take my time. I managed to smile as he held Natalie's hand. They were still just as in love as they'd been on their wedding day. The last one didn't last long, he said. No, but he really wanted her to be his wife. I think Kayla's cheating, I said. Natalie let out a long sigh. My dad mumbled, not again. I'm hiring a private investigator on Monday, but the signs are all there exactly like the ones you warned me about when it came to Mom. If Kayla's cheating, she's probably read a whole book on how to hide it. But I'm done being blind. So, what do you want from me? He asked. I smiled. Natalie chuckled, probably because it wasn't a warm smile. Dad, I'm going to give you the house. Remember when you co-signed the mortgage years ago? Kayla never signed it. Legally, you and I own it, not her. Once I'm out, she'll be nothing more than a tenant. I'm gifting the house to you. Legally, I can do that at no cost under state and federal law. And after the divorce, he asked, once it's over, I'll sign a month-to-month lease with you. That way, you'll handle things with Kayla. Sure, she has some tenant rights because she's lived there so long, but if it comes to it, we'll get a court order to remove her. Unfortunately, I won't be sticking around to handle that part myself. Marvin, have you really thought this through? Natalie asked gently. Kayla and I had conversations about fidelity before we ever got married. She knows about my mother. She knows what that betrayal did to me. I told her plainly, if she ever cheated on me, I would never forgive her. I don't care if it happens once or 100 times if you sleep with someone else. You've broken the promise we made. That's a violation of our prenup. With these no-fault divorce laws, at least I can walk away without owing her a cent. No spousal support either, since she earns just as much as I do. Thankfully, we don't have those dreaded alimony laws like some other states. I'm not giving a cheating woman a dime of my money just because she couldn't stay faithful. I took a sip of beer and glanced at Natalie. Sorry, I'm just worked up about this. I really hope I'm wrong. That night, Kayla came home and curled up on the couch to watch a movie. She smiled at me as always, her eyes lighting up when she saw me. Where have you been? She asked. I met with my dad. Just needed some advice, I replied. About what? A new job? There might be an opportunity coming up. The truth was, I didn't have any real proof, just suspicions. If she was cheating, it wasn't with someone she saw every day. I knew that if unexpected girls' night started happening, that would be a serious red flag. But so far, nothing like that had come up. She used to stay late at work now and then, but I was getting fed up with that. And if I worked late, she'd immediately get suspicious of me. That night, before we went to bed, she cuddled up to me like always and whispered that she loved me. It hurt to think she might be lying. Maybe she did love me, but something inside her wanted more or someone else. If that was the case, we'd split. She could go find whoever she was really looking for. I've read fiction about women who change, who cross lines they never thought they would. The idea of Kayla doing anything like that nearly made me sick. But until I had proof, I had to trust her. Trust but verify. That's what they say. So when I whispered back, "I love you," I meant it. But the possibility of betrayal gnawed at me. The next day was Monday. I went to work first, like always. We had breakfast together, and then I brushed my teeth. Everything about that morning felt normal. Her eyes sparkled when she said she loved me and wished me a great day. I almost felt guilty knowing I had a meeting at lunch with a private investigator to set up surveillance on my wife. After 20 years of what I thought was a happy marriage, this is where we were. When the investigator showed up, I was surprised it was a woman in a trench coat and fedora, like something out of an old detective movie. "I know I look like I walked off a film set," she said with a smirk, catching my reaction. She explained the process, the services, and the costs. Then she asked about her finances. "We have separate accounts," I told her, "but a joint account for bills and household expenses." "Why do you think she's cheating?" I told her about what I saw my mother do, what my father discovered, and how it mirrored what was happening now. She listened carefully, then asked, "How's your sex life?" "It was fine after our son moved out," I replied, "but about 6 months ago it started to decline again. I figured we were both just pushing the issue to the back of our minds. Honestly, I wish I could be intimate with my wife every night. Just because I'm 45 doesn't mean I've lost interest." "Have you noticed any changes in her behavior?" she asked. "Yes," I replied. "They're subtle, but they're there. You know the phrase red flags?" She nodded and I smiled faintly. Not enough for a full-on communist parade, but definitely enough to make me uneasy. She laid out their services, everything from phone tapping and surveillance footage to identity tracking and other more advanced methods. She was honest. Some of these techniques might not hold up in court and could tread into illegal territory. I explained that this wasn't meant to be a long-term arrangement. The truth was, unless I was completely in denial, I had no idea if she was seeing someone during lunch breaks, while working late, or if she was just slipping away now and then for something different. I had to admit I didn't know, and I wanted to. She gave me a few days to think it over, telling me I could call on Friday to begin surveillance the following week. It was hard to let go of intimacy with my wife. I didn't have any concrete answers yet, but the thought of her being with another man or men made me feel sick. I could have lied and claimed I wasn't feeling well, but instead I told her the truth. I just wasn't in the mood. I know she was hurt when I turned her down. Eventually, she asked if I was stressed at work. I was distracted, so I guess that answer satisfied her. As usual, she snuggled close and whispered, "I love you." By Wednesday, I couldn't wait any longer. I called the investigator and asked them to begin right away. I had to know the suspicion was eating me alive. I kept wondering if it was all in my head. It's no wonder so many betrayed spouses end up psychologically broken. In the end, despite the cost, they found the evidence. It only took a month of watching and waiting before her betrayal came to light. By then, I had been reading daily accounts of infidelity, patterns of cheating spouses, how they deceive their partners, and what legal options are available after a marriage falls apart. I had already started packing. I had an evacuation bag ready in the car, and the moving crew knew I was preparing to leave. I just had to give them a date. The house was now legally owned by my father. The lease said nothing about Kayla. With any luck, she'd be evicted in a few months. It was Friday night. I got home at my usual time. Normally, Kayla would be in the living room with a glass of wine watching TV. We'd order food, talk about our week, maybe make weekend plans, snuggle, and eventually head to bed. Before all of this, our Friday nights were great, especially after the kids had moved out. We'd make love all weekend, sometimes barely leaving the bedroom until Sunday. But that night, I heard her in the bathroom. I nearly laughed to myself. It was such a cliché. I grabbed a beer from the kitchen and settled onto the couch. I never thought it would happen to me, I thought as I waited in the dim light for her to appear. I expected a seductive little black dress, but instead she walked in wearing a mismatched blouse, a short skirt, stockings, and heels. She had done her hair, applied makeup, and adorned herself with jewelry to accentuate her beauty. She looked stunning, unfortunately. Not for me. At first, I didn't fully grasp what was happening. "Marvin, I didn't realize you were home," she said, clearly startled. I replied, "I got home at my usual time." "Kayla," I continued, "you've clearly been busy preparing for whatever you're up to. Where are you going?" She took a deep breath before answering, "I'm going on a date tonight, Marvin, with John from work." "It's just for work." Her response was a blatant lie. I knew exactly who John was. He was her affair partner. He worked at her company's headquarters, was married, and had kids around the same age as ours. I wasn't sure what she expected me to say, but there comes a time when a man simply has to walk away. If she thought I would beg or plead, she clearly didn't know me at all. She knew my stance on monogamy, infidelity, and standing my ground. I stared at her for a long moment as I approached. She met me my gaze, but when I held it, she recoiled. I smiled slightly, then turned to head into the kitchen. "Aren't you going to say anything, Marvin?" "No," I replied simply. She clearly didn't understand how ready I was to end it. We had both been playing our parts well. The difference now was that I wasn't going to destroy her heart with lies. "Okay, fair enough," she said, her voice soft. "I'll be home later. We'll talk then." I didn't respond. I simply followed her to the door. She paused, looking at me one last time, her eyes filled with hesitation. I wasn't sure if it was guilt or something else, but I didn't care anymore. "Good night, Marvin," she said quietly. "Goodbye, Kayla," I replied. She must have thought I was just another man who would tolerate this kind of behavior, but I wasn't. I wasn't going to be a cuckold or put up with nonsense like that. I wasn't interested in an open marriage, wife swapping, or anything of the sort. It emasculates, demeans, and completely undermines the vows made during marriage. Once she left, I followed through with my plan. I grabbed my evacuation bag and packed another suitcase, then loaded them into the car. Thankful for the convenience of modern technology, I handled everything online. Our debt was minimal, just one credit card, which I paid off and canceled immediately. I covered all the upcoming bills and transferred the majority of our savings from our joint account into my own. I left her enough to cover a couple of months of rent and bills. After that, she would be on her own. Possession is 9/10 of the law, and she didn't own the house. By the time she realized our savings were gone, I would be long gone. As I walked through the house one last time, I couldn't help but think, so many good memories are now ruined. I took another sip of beer and prepared to make 3 calls. The first one should be simple, but the next 2 would be far more difficult. "Dad, it's confirmed. She's cheating on me." She finally found the courage to admit she was going on a date with another man tonight. The plan was now in motion. "Where are you going?" "To Adelaide." "I have a new 12-month contract there. Once the divorce is final, I'll probably return to Sydney, but we'll see how things go. It's all up in the air for now." "All right, son. I'll make sure she doesn't find out where you are. A new number, and I'll settle everything once I get there. I'll send you my new address once I found somewhere to live. Drive carefully and avoid doing anything reckless. Son, all I'm doing is leaving a cheating marriage." Unfortunately, the phrase "like father, like son" carries little weight here. You've done nothing wrong. Just find peace in your decision, and soon you'll be able to move on with your life. Natalie and I both love you. Do my children know? I'll call them next. Good luck, son. Talk to you soon. Making the calls to my children was the hardest thing I've ever done. I called my daughter first, as she'll always be Daddy's little girl. When I explained the situation, she cried uncontrollably on the other end of the line. It shattered my heart to hear her sobbing because of the pain in mine. I promised her I would always love her, but for now, I had to leave. I'd send her an email with my new contact details once I was settled, but for the time being, I wasn't telling anyone anything. My son, Stan, took a more stoic approach, as I expected from a young man. He called his mother a derogatory term and asked me what I plan to do with him. I'll find out where he lives and inform his wife. I replied, she deserves the truth. Aside from that, I don't want revenge. Stan, this isn't fiction. It's real life. Right now, I'm heartbroken, but all I'm going to do is wait for the divorce and rebuild my life afterward. I'm only 45, maybe 46 when it happens. What about counseling? Charlene asked. Marriage isn't like ours here, and neither are the divorce laws. Stan chimed in. You've been separated for over 12 months, so you can file for divorce. Since we're both over 18, you won't even have to go to court, though you probably will just to make sure everything goes smoothly. She can't force counseling after 20 years of marriage. Be careful, Dad, Stan warned. You know how the courts can be if she's persistent enough. Then I'll take my evidence to the counselor, put the pictures in front of them, and ask them if they'd stay married to a woman who's been cheating on them. Okay, Dad. Take care of yourself and stay in touch when you get there. I'll keep you in the loop as I'm sure Mom will be reaching out to me. She knows the law will protect you. Thanks, Stan. We'll talk soon. That was it. I wrote Kayla a brief letter explaining that I was leaving and that she would hear from my father soon. I didn't explain why I was leaving that as a surprise. I told her that I had already called our children and told them the truth, just as my father had done for me. She could tell her parents that I left, but if I received any insults or requests for reconciliation, I would send them the proof. Finally, I took off my wedding ring and placed it on the coffee table, along with the note and all the evidence I had gathered. These were copies as I kept the originals in case I needed them later. Getting into the car, I wasn't sure whether to laugh or cry, but all the stress I'd been carrying disappeared as soon as I drove away from the house. I booked a hotel on the western outskirts of the city to prepare for my trip to Adelaide. I had 2 weeks to get there and set up my new life. So I took my time and stayed in small country towns along the way, places with nothing more than a pub, a post office, and a police station, often all in one building. A week later, I arrived in Adelaide and was met by several people I recognized from past corporate conferences. I already knew my role, so they took me around the city, showing me potential neighborhoods to live in. I decided to stay in a hotel for a month while I searched for a place. After some research, I chose a modern 3-bedroom apartment in North Adelaide, one of the city's most beautiful suburbs. I wasn't looking to buy as the prices were high, though not as bad as Sydney. I planned to return to Sydney after 12 months. Once I moved in and settled, I informed my father, siblings, and children about the change in my circumstances. Charlene called immediately wanting to visit. I missed her terribly, so I arranged for her to fly out for a month. My son was finishing his studies, but with Christmas just 3 months away, he planned to visit then and stay for a few weeks. As for my father, he kept me updated on what was happening with Kayla. Did you know she didn't come home until the next morning? He asked. Yes. I didn't dismiss the private investigators until the following day, because I was curious about what she was doing that night. She went to dinner with him, and it was all quite romantic. Then they spent the night at a hotel in the city. There was nothing else I needed to know. I thanked the investigators for their work and paid them as their services were no longer required. Well, I heard it through the grapevine and also what she told me. When she got home, she found your wedding ring, the note, and the evidence. She called me, your children, and her family, all in hysterics. You obviously didn't answer your cell phone, and I know she sent you emails. Any calls from her went straight to voicemail, and I marked all her emails as spam. That was just the beginning of her problems. A week later, I showed up at her doorstep with the lease we had signed. Then I showed her the paperwork, proving my father had gifted me the house. Her face turned pale as she realized it was all perfectly legal. I gave her 3 months to find a suitable place to live, and if she didn't leave by then, I would have the police evict her. She's still living there, but I know she wants to move out. Has she asked about me? Of course, she's asked about your family, your children, your friends, even where you work. She's eaten up with guilt for throwing away 20 years of your life together. Has she explained why? Not really. She's sorry, of course, but I heard the same thing from your mother. She was sorry she got caught. Not that she cheated on you. Cheaters always live in a fantasy world where they believe they're doing nothing wrong. The usual excuse is that it was just sex. I never cheated on your mother. And believe me, by the time I was in my 30s and 40s, I had plenty of proposals. But I loved her and would never go back on my vows. I got a second chance with Natalie Marvin. Give yourself time to heal from your marriage. When you're ready, open your heart to someone else. There are millions of good women on this planet. Thank you, Dad. I love you. Love you too, son. Take good care of yourself. Work provided a distraction. I ended up traveling all over South Australia, visiting various stores and suppliers, taking time on weekends to explore the region, particularly the Barossa Valley. I realized that divorce had made me a strong negotiator, unwilling to back down unless it benefited my company. At the very least, my managers were pleased with my performance and were already discussing the possibility of me staying in Adelaide permanently. A month after I moved into the flat, my daughter came to visit. When I was waiting for her at the airport, she yelled, "Daddy!" and ran to me. I embraced her tightly and spun her around. She burst into tears as I whispered how much I loved her and promised that once everything was settled, I'd come home for good. She stayed with me for a week, and although I was working, I spent most of the time at home. Whenever I had a free moment, we talked about anything and everything. She told me that her mother had been calling her nonstop, trying to explain her side of the story. I didn't want to give her the proof, but eventually I gave in and showed her the printed report. By the time she finished reading it, she was in tears and nearly yelled at her mother about how much she hated her. It wasn't my intention to cause that reaction, but despite my promises that her mother still loved her, I had a bad feeling it would take her a long time to forgive her. Or maybe she never would. The day she left was devastating for both of us. I knew she wanted to stay just to keep me company. I held her for what felt like hours before she had to leave. I never cried during the months my marriage fell apart. It frustrated me, but it didn't make me upset. But as I watched her drive away, I couldn't help but cry in the car. It made me realize how lonely I was. Yet her visit had given me a sense of revival. I spoke with her every night, and my son called me at least every few days. My siblings knew what had happened, and my younger sister promised to visit as soon as she could. My father kept me updated on everything going on with Kayla. Even the guys from my old Sydney workplace seemed to be aware of some of the events, though they mostly called just to chat and joke around. It was 6 weeks before Christmas when lightning struck again. I was wandering through the aisles of the nearby supermarket, aimlessly passing the time. Kayla and I used to go grocery shopping together all the time. We'd laugh, joke, and act silly. I reached for a bottle of salad dressing without noticing that another woman was doing the same. Our hands collided, and we both turned to face each other. I think my jaw dropped slightly and her cheeks flushed. "I'm sorry," I said. "No, it's my fault. I didn't notice you. Please take the bottle. I can grab something else instead." I'm not sure where my confidence came from, but I surprised myself by saying, "Tell you what, you can take the bottle if you have coffee with me later." I had no idea who she was, what her name was, or anything else. But that brief touch sparked something inside me, and her beauty captivated me. I reached out my hand. "I'm Marvin." She smiled as she took my hand, and I could feel how silky her skin was. "I'm Juliana. Do you often pick up women in supermarkets? Number, you're the first."